I'm Hazel Williams, 32, and last weekend, my sister Allison screamed, "You ruined our lives," across a crowded restaurant. The silverware froze midair. The worst part? My parents stood up and applauded her outburst. After years of being the family fixer, I simply walked away. I didn't fight back. I just left, quietly. Within 24 hours, my phone exploded with 99 calls. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and finding your strength. Growing up as the eldest Williams daughter always meant one thing: responsibility. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My father, Robert, a successful accountant. My mother, Margaret, a dedicated elementary school teacher. My sister, Allison, for years younger. And me. Our colonial-style home in Connecticut, with its white picket fence, concealed the complicated dynamics that defined our family. From an early age, I understood my role. I was expected to excel in school, help around the house, and most importantly, look after Allison. "She's more sensitive than you," my mother would explain whenever Allison threw a tantrum or broke something valuable. "You're the strong one, Hazel." I embraced my position as the reliable daughter. By 16, I was maintaining a 4.0 GPA, working part-time at the local library, and still finding time to drive Allison to her dance classes 3 times a week. Meanwhile, Allison struggled academically and socially, cycling through friend groups and activities with alarming frequency. "Allison's just finding herself," Dad would say when she quit yet another extracurricular halfway through the season. When I expressed interest in quitting piano after 6 years to focus on debate team, I was reminded about commitment and following through. The pattern continued into college. I attended State University on a partial scholarship, working 2 jobs to cover the rest. I'd planned every detail, researched every opportunity, and created a careful budget. Allison, however, changed her major 3 times at the private college my parents paid for entirely. When she failed classes, my parents hired tutors. When she crashed her second car, they bought her a third. After graduating with honors in finance, I secured a position at Meridian Financial, one of the most prestigious firms in Boston. Over 8 years, I climbed from analyst to senior advisor, managing portfolios for high-net-worth clients. My apartment was modest but mine, paid for with my own money. Allison's post-college years followed a different trajectory. She bounced between jobs and marketing, never lasting more than a year. Each departure came with a story: a boss who didn't appreciate her, colleagues who were jealous, a company that couldn't recognize her potential. Between positions, she'd move back home, where my parents welcomed her with open arms and open wallets. "Your sister just hasn't found her calling yet," Mom would tell me during our weekly phone calls. "Not everyone knows exactly what they want like you do, Hazel." The family dynamics became most apparent whenever Allison needed rescuing. When she couldn't make rent, I received the call asking if I could help out just this once. When she got into legal trouble for driving under the influence, I was expected to find and pay for the lawyer. Each time I helped, I received minimal thanks but maximum expectation that I would do it again. 2 years ago, I met Michael Thompson at a charity fundraiser. A pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and an even kinder heart, Michael saw through my carefully constructed walls. On our 3rd date, he asked why I checked my phone so frequently. "Family stuff," I said vaguely. "Must be important family stuff to interrupt our conversation about whether pineapple belongs on pizza," he replied with a smile that made me want to tell him everything. So I did. I told him about the impossible standards, the double measures, the constant expectation that I would fix whatever Allison broke. Instead of dismissing my concerns or defending my family as just loving you in their own way, like previous boyfriends, Michael listened. Really listened. "That sounds exhausting," he said simply. "And unfair." Those words, that validation, changed something in me. Over the next 2 years, with Michael's support, I began setting small boundaries with my family. I didn't immediately answer every text. I occasionally said no to financial requests. I focused on building our relationship, which blossomed into the healthiest connection I'd ever known. Last month, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. As we celebrated on the beach, watching the sunset with champagne, I felt genuinely happy and hopeful about the future. I even felt optimistic about sharing our engagement news with my family at my parents' upcoming 35th wedding anniversary celebration. They'll be happy for us, I assured Michael as we drove toward my childhood home last Friday afternoon. It's a celebration already. Perfect timing. Michael squeezed my hand, but said nothing, his silence speaking volumes about his doubts. As we turned onto Maple Street, the familiar sight of my parents' colonial home came into view, American flag waving gently in the spring breeze. I took a deep breath, hoping this weekend would finally be different. I had no idea how right and wrong I would be. The moment we pulled into the driveway, I noticed my father watching from the living room window, the curtain falling back into place as I turned off the engine. Michael grabbed our bags from the trunk while I smoothed my blouse and checked my engagement ring, a beautiful emerald surrounded by small diamonds, unique and perfect. "Ready?" Michael asked, his doctor's eyes reading my anxiety with practiced precision. "As I'll ever be," I replied, plastering on the smile I'd perfected over 3 decades of Williams' family gatherings. The front door opened before we reached it. Mom stood there, hair freshly colored to hide the gray, wearing her company's coming cardigan despite the warm May afternoon. "Hazel, sweetie," she said, offering a quick hug before turning to Michael with considerably more warmth. "And Dr. Thompson. So wonderful to see you again." Dad appeared behind her, giving my shoulder an awkward pat before shaking Michael's hand firmly. "Good drive up from Boston?" "Not bad at all, Mr. Williams," Michael replied politely. I glanced around the entryway. "Is Allison not here yet?" Mom and Dad exchanged a quick look. "She's running a bit late," Mom explained. "You know your sister, always on her own schedule." The familiar excuse landed like a stone in my stomach. If I had been the one running late, there would have been concerned calls, minor scolding, and passive-aggressive comments about consideration for others. Dad carried our bags upstairs while Mom led us to the kitchen, where she'd prepared her special welcome spread, cheese, crackers, and her famous spinach dip. As I reached for a cracker, she launched into family updates. "Aunt Cynthia's hip replacement went well. Oh, and your cousin Bethany is expecting twins. And Allison," she lowered her voice conspiratorially, "might have met someone special. She's bringing him this weekend." "That's great," I said, my fingers instinctively touching my engagement ring. "Actually, Mom, Michael and I have some news too." "Hazel," she interrupted, placing her hand on mine. "Before I forget, when Allison gets here, maybe don't mention your recent promotion. She's between jobs right now and feeling a bit sensitive about career topics." I blinked, absorbing the preemptive request to diminish my accomplishments. I wasn't planning to make it a focus of conversation. "Wonderful." Mom smiled, patting my hand. "You've always been so understanding." Michael caught my eye across the kitchen island, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes communicating volumes. "Let me show you to your room," Mom continued. "We've got the guest room all made up for you too." I followed her upstairs, confusion growing as we passed my old bedroom door, which was closed. The guest room was at the end of the hall, small, with a double bed and minimal furnishings. "I thought we'd be staying in my old room," I said, noting the room's single window that faced the neighbor's brick wall. "Oh, Allison's still using that room when she stays over," Mom explained. "And she'll be here all week, so we thought it best not to disrupt her things." My old bedroom, the larger room with the window seat overlooking the garden, had effectively become Allison's second bedroom, while I was assigned to the guest quarters despite visiting with my fiancé. The message couldn't have been clearer. Allison was the permanent daughter. I was the visitor. "This is fine," I said, swallowing my disappointment. "Thanks for having us." When Mom left, Michael closed the door and sat beside me on the bed. "You okay?" "It's nothing new," I said. "Just the usual pecking order." "It's not nothing," Michael countered gently. "And it's not okay." I leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his steadiness. "Let's just get through this weekend. We'll announce our engagement at dinner tomorrow night, celebrate with everyone, and then head home Sunday. 2 days." The sound of the front door slamming and my mother's delighted exclamations announced Allison's arrival. Taking a deep breath, I headed downstairs with Michael, ready to plaster on another smile. Allison stood in the foyer, designer sunglasses pushed back on her head, looking effortlessly stylish in clothes I knew she couldn't afford on her sporadic income. Beside her stood a tall man with carefully tousled hair and an expensive watch. "Hazel," she squealed, air kissing near my cheeks. "And Michael. You guys remember Jake, right?" I did not remember Jake, because I had never met Jake, but I smiled and extended my hand anyway. "Nice to meet you, Jake." A flicker of confusion crossed his face before he smoothed it away. "Good to see you again," he replied, the lie flowing easily. Allison had already told him we'd met before, the first red flag of many to come. During the elaborate welcome dinner Mom had prepared, I noticed the whispered conversations between Allison and my parents whenever I left the room to help with dishes or get more drinks. They'd stop abruptly when I returned, fake smiles plastered on their faces. "So, Hazel," Jake said during dessert, "Allison tells me you work in the same industry?" I frowned. "I'm in financial advisory." "What field are you in?" "Marketing," he replied. "Like Allison." I turned to my sister. "I thought you were between jobs right now?" A tense silence fell over the table. Allison's eyes narrowed slightly before she laughed, the sound brittle. "I'm freelancing while I consider my options. There's this amazing opportunity at Criterion Global, but someone from Meridian Financial gave me a terrible reference." Her gaze fixed meaningfully on me. "Meridian has thousands of employees," I said carefully. "I don't have any connection to HR or hiring." "Connections work in mysterious ways," she replied with a shrug that suggested otherwise. Dad quickly changed the subject to safer territory, plans for tomorrow's anniversary dinner at Le Maison, the upscale French restaurant downtown. As the conversation flowed around me, I caught snatches of other concerning comments. Allison mentioned always having to compete with perfect Hazel. Mom referenced family loyalty while looking pointedly at me. Dad talked about supporting family members through challenges with a similar glance. After dinner, as Michael and I washed dishes, a task Allison was somehow exempt from, I overheard voices from the living room. "I know it's hard having her here," Mom was saying softly. "But it's just for the weekend." "She's always been difficult," Dad added. "Always has to one-up everyone." "At least Michael seems nice," Allison replied. "Too nice for her, honestly." I nearly dropped the plate I was drying. They were talking about me. The daughter who had always followed the rules, who had always been there to help, who had never asked for anything in return. "You heard that too, right?" Michael whispered, confirming I wasn't imagining things. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I placed the dish in the cabinet. "Welcome to the Williams family dynamics," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the heaviness in my chest. That night, lying beside Michael in the small guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd ever truly been seen by my family. The engagement ring on my finger caught the moonlight, reminding me that at least one person saw me clearly. "We should leave tomorrow," Michael suggested quietly in the darkness. "This doesn't feel healthy." "Let me try to clear the air first," I replied. "There's obviously been some misunderstanding with Allison. If we can just talk it through." Michael didn't argue, but his silence spoke volumes. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that this weekend was about to get much worse. Morning arrived with the aroma of coffee and the murmur of voices. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Michael, and followed the sounds downstairs. In the kitchen, my parents and Allison sat around the island, cups in hand, engaged in animated conversation. Their laughter cut off abruptly when I appeared in the doorway. "Morning," I said, trying to sound cheerful despite the awkward silence. "There's coffee in the pot," Mom offered, her tone notably cooler than the one she'd been using moments earlier. I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, an outsider in my own family kitchen. "What's everyone up to today before the big dinner?" "Just catching up," Allison replied vaguely. "Family stuff." The implication was clear, family stuff that didn't include me. When Michael came downstairs, the atmosphere shifted. My parents brightened, asking about his work and offering him homemade blueberry muffins that hadn't been mentioned to me. Allison engaged him in conversation about a medical drama she'd been watching, effectively monopolizing his attention. "We should probably start getting ready soon," I suggested after an hour of this treatment. "I thought maybe we could all go for a walk first." "It's beautiful outside." "Oh, Mom promised to help me with something," Allison responded quickly. "Maybe next time." Back in our room, Michael closed the door and turned to me. "Hazel, this isn't right. The way they're treating you." "It'll get better," I insisted, though with less conviction than before. "Once everyone's together tonight, we'll clear the air." Michael sighed. "I think we should leave. We can come back another time when things are less, whatever this is." "Please," I said, touching his arm. "Just give it until tonight. This dinner is important to my parents." He reluctantly agreed, but his concern was evident as he headed to the shower. While he was in the bathroom, I decided to organize my things for tonight's dinner. Opening my overnight bag, I immediately noticed something was wrong. My items had been rearranged, cosmetics opened, my journal moved from its hidden pocket to the top of my clothes. Someone had been through my belongings. A quick inventory revealed something even more disturbing. My great-grandmother's pearl earrings, which I'd brought to wear tonight, were missing. Heart pounding, I searched every corner of the bag, then the room. Nothing. When Michael emerged from the bathroom, I explained what happened. "Are you sure you packed them?" he asked. "Positive. I specifically remember putting them in the zippered pocket." With growing unease, I decided to look around the house. As I passed Allison's room, my old room, the door stood slightly ajar. I hesitated, ethical concerns warring with suspicion. Then I heard Jake's voice from inside. "Are you sure it's okay to borrow this? It looks expensive." "It's fine," came Allison's reply. "Hazel owes me anyway." I pushed the door open without knocking. Allison stood at the vanity, while Jake sat on the bed. On her wrist gleamed my watch, not just any watch, but the Cartier that Michael had given me for our first anniversary, worth several $1,000s. "What are you doing with my watch?" I demanded, shock overriding politeness. Allison barely flinched. "Oh, hey, just borrowing it for tonight. You have so many nice things." "That was a gift from Michael. And it was in my locked bag." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic." "I was going to return it." "Like you were going to return my pearl earrings?" I countered. A flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossed her face before her expression hardened. "I don't have your earrings." "Allison," Jake intervened, looking uncomfortable, "maybe you should give back the watch." Before she could respond, Mom appeared in the hallway. "What's going on? Why are you interrogating your sister, Hazel?" I turned to her in disbelief. She took my watch from my locked bag without asking. "And my earrings are missing." Mom's expression shifted to one I knew well, the look that preceded taking Allison's side. "I'm sure she was just borrowing it. There's no need to make such a fuss over material things." "It's not about the material value," I protested. "It's about privacy and respect. Someone went through my personal belongings." "You've always been so possessive," Mom sighed, as if my desire for basic boundaries was a character flaw. "Allison, give your sister back her watch, though I think you're overreacting, Hazel." Allison unclasped the watch with obvious reluctance and handed it to me without meeting my eyes. As she did, I noticed a folder on the bed with familiar letterhead, Meridian Financial. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the folder. Jake quickly covered it with a pillow, but not before I glimpsed what appeared to be my company's internal documentation. "Nothing," Allison said too quickly. A horrible suspicion formed in my mind. I stepped toward the bed, but Jake stood up, blocking my path. "I think you should leave now," he said firmly. "This is my old bedroom," I reminded him, standing my ground. "And I want to know why you have documents from my workplace." The commotion brought both my father and Michael to the doorway. Michael took in the scene with concerned eyes, while Dad immediately moved to stand beside Allison. "What's happening?" Dad demanded. "Hazel's freaking out over nothing," Allison said, her voice taking on a tremulous quality I recognized from childhood, the precursor to tears that would inevitably bring parental sympathy. "It's not nothing," I insisted. "She took my watch without permission, my earrings are missing, and they have documents from Meridian that they're hiding." Dad turned to me with disappointment. "Why are you trying to ruin this weekend? First the accusations, now this invasion of your sister's privacy." "Her privacy?" I echoed incredulously. "She went through my locked bag." Michael stepped forward. "Mr. Williams, with all due respect, Hazel's concerns seem legitimate." My father's expression hardened. "This is a family matter." "Michael is family," I stated firmly. "Or he will be. We're engaged." The announcement fell into shocked silence, but not with the reaction I'd hoped for. Instead of congratulations, my mother's hand flew to her chest as if I'd delivered terrible news. "You couldn't wait until after your sister's announcement?" she asked, genuine distress in her voice. "What announcement?" Allison glared at me. "Jake and I are engaged too. I was going to tell everyone at dinner tonight." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not because of the engagement itself, but because of my family's reaction. Their distress was about me stealing Allison's thunder, not about concealing documents from my workplace or taking my possessions without permission. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "That doesn't explain why you have Meridian documents." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "We should tell her, ally." Allison shot him a warning look, but he continued, "She's going to find out anyway when the applications go through." "Applications?" I repeated, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Under pressure from all sides, Allison finally admitted the truth. She had been using my credentials and work history to apply for marketing positions, claiming my financial experience as her own. She'd even forged recommendation letters using Meridian letterhead. "You could get me fired," I said, the full implications hitting me. "This is identity theft. It's illegal." "Don't be so dramatic," Allison scoffed. "I just borrowed your experience. It's not like you need it, you already have a job." A job I could lose if anyone discovered this fraud. Instead of acknowledging the severity of the situation, my parents immediately began damage control for Allison. "I'm sure no harm was done," Dad insisted. "Hazel, you need to calm down," Mom added. "Your sister is trying to get back on her feet." Their dismissal of such a serious breach left me speechless. Michael, however, wasn't constrained by family dynamics. "This is identity theft," he stated firmly. "It's a criminal offense that could have serious consequences for Hazel's career and reputation." My father bristled. "We don't need an outsider telling us how to handle family matters." "He's not an outsider," I said, finding my voice again. "And he's right." The confrontation might have escalated further, but we were interrupted by the ringing of my phone. Stepping into the hallway to answer it, I was shocked to hear my boss's voice. "Hazel, sorry to bother you on your family weekend, but we've received some strange emails from your account. Something about withdrawing your application from Richardson Partners? I wasn't aware you were looking to leave Meridian." My blood ran cold. "I'm not." "What application?" As my boss explained, I realized with horror that someone had accessed my work email and sent messages that could destroy my professional reputation. When I returned to the room, My suspicions were confirmed by the guilty look on Allison's face when I mentioned the emails. "You accessed my laptop too?" I asked, though it was barely a question. "I just needed to make the applications look legitimate," she admitted without remorse. "It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. A very big deal. And as I looked at my family, all three of them positioned protectively around Allison despite her clear wrongdoing, I finally accepted what Michael had been gently suggesting all along. This wasn't a normal family dynamic. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or parental favoritism. This was something much more toxic, and it wasn't going to change no matter how many chances I gave them. "We're leaving," I said quietly to Michael. "Right now." For once, no one tried to stop me. Despite our morning confrontation, my parents insisted we all still attend the anniversary dinner as planned. For appearance's sake, Mom had said, her eyes pleading. Against my better judgment and Michael's quiet concerns, I agreed to this final family obligation before heading back to Boston. Le Maison was the most upscale restaurant in town, with crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and a French-trained chef who had once cooked for celebrities in New York City. My parents had reserved their largest private dining room for the occasion, inviting aunts, uncles, and close family friends to celebrate their 35 years of marriage. Michael and I arrived exactly on time, dressed formally but subdued, me in a simple black dress, him in a charcoal suit. I'd made an emergency call to my boss, explaining enough of the situation to mitigate any professional damage, but the stress of the day had left dark circles under my eyes that even careful makeup couldn't completely conceal. "We'll make an appearance, congratulate your parents, and leave early," Michael reassured me as we approached the restaurant entrance. 2 hours, tops. I squeezed his hand gratefully, drawing strength from his steadiness. "Thank you for being here." "Always," he replied simply. The maitre d' led us through the main dining area to the private room at the back. As we entered, I immediately sensed something was wrong. Conversation hushed, and several relatives glanced away awkwardly when they saw me. Aunt Patricia, usually effusive with greetings, suddenly became fascinated with the pattern on her napkin. Uncle George, who had taught me to fish when I was 10, studied his menu with unusual intensity. Mom waved us to our assigned seats, at the far end of the table, as distant from the place of honor as possible without being in another room entirely. Allison and Jake, meanwhile, sat right beside my parents, already deep in animated conversation with the guests of honor. "Hazel," my cousin Rebecca whispered as I took my seat, "is it true you tried to sabotage Allison's job prospects?" I stared at her, stunned. "What? No. Who told you that?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Allison mentioned you've been having issues with her success lately." Before I could respond, another relative leaned in from across the table. "And something about you trying to break up her engagement? That seems harsh, even if you're going through a difficult time." My mind reeled. Allison had been systematically poisoning my relationships with the extended family, painting me as jealous and unstable. Looking around the table, I saw the evidence in every averted gaze and whispered conversation. "None of that is true," I said firmly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "In fact, Allison has been." "Champagne for everyone," my father announced, standing at the head of the table. "A toast to family and to love that stands the test of time." The interruption was deliberate, cutting off my defense before I could make it. As glasses were filled and raised, I noticed Allison whispering something to my mother, who then passed a meaningful look to my father. After the toast, as appetizers were being served, my father cleared his throat again. "While we're all together, Allison and Jake have a special announcement." This was the moment they'd orchestrated, allowing Allison to announce her engagement before the entire family, stealing the spotlight just as they'd accused me of doing earlier. "Jake and I are engaged," Allison exclaimed, flashing a diamond ring that looked suspiciously similar to one I'd seen in my mother's jewelry box, likely my grandmother's heirloom piece that had been promised to me as the eldest granddaughter. The table erupted in congratulations, with my parents beaming proudly. No one mentioned my engagement, though Michael's ring glinted clearly on my finger. As dinner progressed, the situation deteriorated further. Michael received a text from a colleague, then turned to me with a troubled expression. "Someone's been calling the hospital administration, claiming to be your friend and asking questions about my personal life," he murmured. "They've been suggesting I might be involved with a nurse there." The pieces clicked into place. The rumors about Michael cheating, the professional sabotage, the stolen heirlooms, all part of a coordinated campaign to discredit me and elevate Allison. When my Uncle Robert directly asked me about those emails to Allison's potential employers, I'd reached my breaking point. Setting down my fork with careful precision, I addressed the table. "I think there's been some misinformation circulating," I began calmly. "I've never contacted any of Allison's potential employers. In fact, Allison has been using my credentials without permission to apply for jobs, claiming my experience as her own." A stunned silence fell over the table. Allison's face flushed red. "That's not all," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "She's taken personal items from my locked bag, accessed my work laptop to send fraudulent emails, and apparently spread rumors about my fiancé's fidelity." "Hazel, this isn't the time," my mother interrupted, her smile strained. "When would be the appropriate time to discuss identity theft and defamation, Mom?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like crystal in the chandeliers above us. Allison's composure cracked. "You always do this," she suddenly screamed, her voice echoing through the restaurant. "You ruin everything. You ruined our lives." The outburst froze every diner mid-bite. Waiters paused with trays aloft. The pianist in the main dining room missed a note. What happened next would forever change my understanding of my family. My parents, the people who had raised me, who I thought loved me despite our complicated dynamics, stood up from their seats and began to applaud Allison's outburst. "That's right, honey," Mom encouraged. "You tell her how you feel." "We're with you," Dad added, his hands still clapping. Other family members, confused but conditioned to follow my parents' lead, tentatively joined the applause. The surreal scene, a restaurant full of people applauding a grown woman's tantrum directed at me, felt like something from a psychological horror film. "You don't belong here," Allison continued, emboldened by the support. "Go away. Go back to your perfect life and leave us alone." Michael stood up beside me, his face a mask of controlled anger. "This is unacceptable," he said firmly. "Hazel has done nothing but support this family for years, often at great personal cost." "Stay out of this," my father warned. "You don't know our family." "I know enough," Michael replied. "I know Hazel deserves better than this." I placed my hand on his arm, suddenly calm in the eye of the emotional hurricane. "It's okay," I said quietly. "They're right about one thing. I don't belong here." With a strange sense of clarity, I reached for my purse and stood. "Mom, Dad, congratulations on 35 years. I wish you many more. Allison, Jake, congratulations on your engagement. Everyone else, enjoy your evening." "Hazel, don't be dramatic," my mother started, but I was already walking away, Michael by my side. No one called after me. No one followed us out. As we stepped into the cool evening air, the weight of decades of emotional manipulation began to lift from my shoulders. "Are you okay?" Michael asked as we reached the car. "No," I answered honestly. "But I think I will be." We drove back to my parents' house in silence, packed our belongings in less than 10 minutes, and headed toward Boston. I turned off my phone as we merged onto the highway, watching the familiar landmarks of my hometown disappear in the rearview mirror. "I'm sorry your family treated you that way," Michael said eventually. "I'm starting to think they've always treated me that way," I replied. "I just couldn't see it clearly until now." The realization brought both pain and, surprisingly, relief. As the miles stretched between us and the restaurant where my family continued to celebrate without me, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. I slept deeply that night, the kind of sleep that comes after a long overdue release of tension. When I awoke in our Boston apartment the next morning, sunlight streaming through the blinds, I felt different, lighter somehow, despite the emotional bruising of the previous day. Then I saw my phone. 99 missed calls, I whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. Michael looked over my shoulder, coffee mug in hand. All from your family? Most from my parents and Allison, but there are calls from aunts, uncles, cousins, even people I barely know. I scrolled through the notifications. And 43 voicemails. You don't have to listen to them now, Michael said gently. Or ever, if you don't want to. But I knew I needed to hear what they had to say. Setting the phone on speaker, I began playing the messages, starting with the earliest ones from right after we'd left the restaurant. Hazel, this is your mother. I can't believe you would embarrass us like this. Call me back immediately. Hey sis, real mature storming out like that. Mom's upset, thanks a lot. Call her. Hazel, your father. Your behavior tonight was unacceptable. We raised you better than this. The messages continued in this vein, accusations, guilt trips, demands for apologies. Not one acknowledged my feelings or the legitimacy of my concerns. Around message 20, the tone began to shift. Hazel, it's Mom again. We're worried about you. This isn't like you. Are you having some kind of breakdown? Hey, it's Uncle George. Your parents are pretty upset. Whatever's going on with you and your sister, family comes first, right? Give them a call. By the 40th message, they'd moved to threats. This is your father. If you don't call us back by noon, we'll be contacting the Boston police to do a wellness check. This behavior is concerning. The final messages from early that morning had circled back to guilt and manipulation. Hazel, Mom here. I don't understand why you're doing this to us. After everything we've done for you. Please call. I set the phone down, emotionally exhausted just from listening. Not a single one of them asked if I was okay or acknowledged what Allison did. Michael sat beside me on the couch, his presence steady and grounding. What do you want to do? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to call them back and try to explain again. Another part never wants to speak to them again. Those both sound like reasonable reactions to me. I leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his support. I think I need some outside perspective. This all feels so normal and not normal at the same time. That afternoon, I called Dr. Eleanor Bennett, a therapist whose card I'd kept from a mental health awareness event at work months earlier. To my surprise, she had a cancellation and could see me that same day. Family dynamics can be incredibly complex, Dr. Bennett said after I'd summarized the weekend's events. What you're describing sounds like a classic scapegoat-golden child dynamic. Scapegoat. I repeated, the term vaguely familiar. In dysfunctional family systems, particularly those with narcissistic tendencies, one child is often designated as the problem, the scapegoat, while another becomes the perfect one, the golden child. But the roles aren't based on actual behavior. They're assigned. As she explained further, pieces of my childhood began to make sense in ways they never had before. My constant responsibility, Allison's freedom from consequences, the different standards we were held to, all part of a system I hadn't created but had been trying to fix my entire life. But my parents aren't bad people, I protested weakly. They've always provided for us. Providing materially is one aspect of parenting, Dr. Bennett acknowledged. But emotional support, respect for boundaries, and equitable treatment are equally important. From what you described, those elements have been consistently missing in your relationship with your family. I left that first session with recommended reading about family dynamics and a strange sense of validation. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that maybe the problem wasn't that I wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe the problem was that I was trying to win a game that had been rigged from the start. Over the next few days, as I returned to work and dealt with the professional fallout from Allison's actions, more revelations emerged. My boss, concerned about the strange emails, had initiated an IT investigation that revealed multiple unauthorized access attempts to my work accounts, all traced back to IP addresses matching my parents' home and Allison's apartment. "We've secured your accounts," my boss assured me. "And just so you know, we received a call from someone claiming to be your sister last month, asking about your performance review." HR didn't share any information, of course. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. It wasn't just about borrowed clothes or sibling rivalry. Allison had been systematically undermining my professional reputation while simultaneously using my credentials for her own benefit. Michael's family, in contrast, responded to the situation with genuine concern for my well-being. His mother called simply to check if I was okay, making no demands and offering support without conditions. His sister sent a thoughtful text: "Family should lift you up, not tear you down. We're here for you both." The contrast was illuminating. A week after the disastrous dinner, I received an unexpected email from Jake, Allison's fiancé. "I thought you should know," he wrote. "Allison wasn't fired from her last job because of anything you did. She was let go for taking client information to use for personal networking. I didn't know the extent of what was happening with your credentials until this weekend. I'm sorry for my part in it." The email confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. The narrative of me sabotaging Allison's career was entirely fabricated to cover her own misconduct. As I dug deeper into my family history, other revelations surfaced. During a conversation with my grandfather, I learned that the money my parents had claimed to set aside for my college education, money I never saw, forcing me to work throughout school, had actually been given to Allison for her first car and a trip to Europe after her graduation. "I always wondered why you never thanked me for the contribution," my grandfather said, confusion evident in his voice. "Your parents said they'd pass it along to you." "They never did," I told him, another puzzle piece falling into place. Reconnecting with old friends revealed more truth. My college roommate Lauren confessed she'd stopped inviting me to gatherings because Allison had told her I found their friendship embarrassing and beneath me. "I should have asked you directly," Lauren said regretfully. "But it seemed to explain why you'd become so distant junior year." The distance hadn't been my choice. It had been engineered through Allison's deliberate isolation tactics, supported by my parents' narrative that I was too focused on achievement to maintain friendships. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I sat in Dr. Bennett's office for our 4th session, a legal pad filled with notes in my lap. "I've been researching family toxicity," I explained, "and recognizing the patterns. The triangulation where they'd talk about me to each other, but never directly to me. The gaslighting, making me question my own experiences. The moving goalposts, where no achievement was ever quite enough." Dr. Bennett nodded encouragingly. "Recognition is an important step." "What else have you discovered?" "That I can't fix them," I said, the words both painful and liberating. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn their approval by being perfect, responsible, successful. But the game was rigged. No matter what I did, Allison would always be the favorite, and I would always be expected to sacrifice for her." "And how does that realization make you feel?" I considered the question carefully. Sad, angry, but also free. If nothing I do will ever be enough, then I might as well stop trying and live for myself instead. In the weeks that followed, with Michael's support and Dr. Bennett's guidance, I began to implement boundaries I'd never before had the courage to establish. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to trusted friends and colleagues. I set up robust security on all my accounts. I consulted with a lawyer about the identity theft, who sent a formal cease and desist letter to Allison. The hardest decision was what to do about my parents. After much deliberation, I sent them an email outlining my conditions for any future relationship, acknowledgement of the pattern of favoritism, family therapy, and genuine remorse for their role in Allison's destructive behavior. Their response was predictable but still painful: denial, deflection, and demands that I apologize for tearing the family apart. As spring turned to summer, I focused on rebuilding. Michael and I began planning our wedding, a small ceremony with only people who genuinely supported us. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with due to my family's interference. I poured energy into projects at work that had been neglected during years of family crises, and slowly, the constant ache of rejection began to fade, replaced by the steady warmth of authentic connections. You know what I realized today? I told Michael one evening as we walked along the Charles River, the sunset painting the water in shades of gold and pink. I always thought there was something wrong with me, some fundamental flaw that made me unlovable to my family, but there wasn't. They just needed someone to be the problem, and I was assigned that role before I could even speak. Michael squeezed my hand. Their loss. The woman I see is compassionate, brilliant, and incredibly resilient. Resilient, I repeated, testing the word. I like that better than strong. Strong was always their code for take more abuse without complaining. As the river flowed steadily beside us, I felt a similar current of certainty within me. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Untangling decades of manipulation never is, but for the first time, I was walking my own path, not the one my family had laid out for me. And despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I was going to be okay. Ms. Williams, I've reviewed the emails that were sent from your account, said Mr. Patterson, Meridian Financial's head of compliance, his expression grave across the conference table. The content is concerning, to say the least. It was Monday morning, 3 days after I'd changed my phone number, and I'd requested this meeting to address the professional ramifications of Allison's actions. My stomach knotted as Mr. Patterson slid a folder across the table containing printouts of the fraudulent emails. As you can see, he continued, these messages not only withdrew your name from consideration at Richardson Partners, but also made disparaging comments about Meridian's leadership and client practices. I scanned the emails, my horror growing with each paragraph. Allison hadn't just withdrawn a fictional application, she'd burned professional bridges I hadn't even built yet, using language that could easily be construed as unethical whistleblowing without actual evidence. I didn't write these, I stated firmly, meeting his gaze. As I explained to Ms. Chen, my sister gained unauthorized access to my accounts during a family visit. I've already filed a police report regarding the identity theft. I handed him my own folder containing the police report, the cease and desist letter from my lawyer, and documentation of the IP addresses that had accessed my account. Mr. Patterson reviewed the documents carefully, his expression softening slightly. This is thorough, Ms. Williams. I appreciate your proactive approach to addressing the situation. My reputation and integrity are paramount to me, I replied. I want to ensure there's no lingering doubt about my commitment to Meridian or my professional ethics. By the end of the meeting, we had developed a remediation plan. I would personally contact anyone who had received the fraudulent emails to clarify the situation. Meridian would issue a formal statement, if necessary. Most importantly, my standing at the firm remained secure. Your work has always been exemplary, Mr. Patterson assured me as we concluded. One incident, particularly one that wasn't your fault, doesn't erase 7 years of excellent service. The professional crisis averted, I turned my attention to the personal one. That afternoon, I met with Leah Goldstein, the lawyer who had drafted the cease and desist letter to Allison. The identity theft is clear-cut, she explained in her straightforward manner. Using your credentials for job applications, accessing your accounts without permission, these are criminal offenses. The question is how far you want to pursue this legally. I considered the question carefully. I don't necessarily want to see my sister with a criminal record. I just want this to stop and to protect myself going forward. Then let's focus on prevention and protection rather than punishment, Leah suggested. We'll create a comprehensive plan to secure your identity and document the patterns of behavior without immediately escalating to criminal charges. Over the next few hours, we developed a strategic approach. I would implement credit monitoring and identity protection services. We documented all instances of credential misuse and account breaches. Leah drafted official communications to any companies where Allison had applied using my information, clarifying that the applications were fraudulent. "What about my extended family?" I asked as we wrapped up. "They've only heard Allison's version of events." "That's a separate issue," Leah acknowledged, "but one worth addressing if these relationships matter to you. Consider a factual, unemotional communication that simply states your perspective without accusation or defensiveness." That evening, I drafted a careful email to my extended family members, focusing on verifiable facts rather than emotions or accusations. I attached documentation where appropriate, screenshots of the unauthorized emails, the police report reference number, dates and times of the account breaches. "I'm not sharing this to create division," I wrote in conclusion, "but to correct misinformation that has affected my relationships with many of you. I value family, but I also value truth and mutual respect. I hope we can move forward with a clearer understanding of the situation." I sent the email, then turned off my computer, uncertain what the response would be but confident I had done what I could to reclaim my narrative. The next major step was addressing the financial entanglements with my family. Over the years, I had maintained joint savings accounts with my parents for emergencies, accounts that, I now realized, had primarily been used for Allison's emergencies. At my bank, I methodically closed these joint accounts, transferring my portion of the funds to new accounts under my name only. I removed myself as a cosigner on a car loan I'd helped my parents secure years ago. I canceled the credit card I'd allowed Allison to use just for emergencies after discovering she'd recently charged several $1,000s at luxury retailers. Each severed financial tie felt like removing a tether that had bound me to unhealthy patterns. By the end of the week, my financial life was entirely my own for the first time in my adult life. Michael and I also began planning our wedding, a small ceremony at a coastal New England inn, inviting only those who had demonstrated genuine care for our well-being. As we selected a date for the following spring, I felt a pang at the thought of not having my father walk me down the aisle, but it was overshadowed by the relief of imagining a drama-free celebration surrounded by authentic love. "We could elope," Michael suggested one evening as we compared venue options. "Skip the ceremony altogether." I considered it briefly, then shook my head. "No. I want to celebrate our commitment with the people who truly support us. I don't want to keep shrinking my life to accommodate the damage my family has done." 2 weeks after sending my email to the extended family, responses had trickled in. Some expressed shock and sympathy. Others maintained cautious neutrality. A few, particularly those closest to my parents, responded with dismissal or defense of the status quo. I accepted each reaction without argument, recognizing that I couldn't control others' perspectives, only my own actions. It was a Saturday afternoon in early July when the confrontation I'd been both expecting and dreading finally arrived. Michael and I were enjoying a quiet lunch on our apartment balcony when the buzzer sounded. "William's family for Hazel," came the concierge's voice through the intercom. My stomach dropped. All of them. 3 people, older couple and younger woman. Michael looked at me questioningly. "Do you want me to tell them you're not available?" I took a deep breath, considering my options. After weeks of boundary setting and reflection, I felt stronger, more centered. Perhaps it was time to face them directly. "No," I decided. "Let them up. But stay with me, please." Minutes later, my parents and Allison stood awkwardly in our living room, looking simultaneously out of place and entitled to be there. Mom clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Dad maintained his authoritative stance, hands in pockets. Allison hung slightly behind them, her expression a mix of defiance and uncertainty. "You changed your number," Mom began accusingly. "We've been worried sick." I sent an email explaining my boundaries. I replied calmly, including that I needed space from constant contact. "Emails are for business, not family," Dad countered. "We raised you to communicate properly." I think proper communication includes respect for clearly stated boundaries, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Which brings me to the question, why are you here, unannounced, after I explicitly asked for space? They exchanged glances, seemingly thrown by my direct approach. In the past, I would have immediately shifted to appeasement mode, offering drinks, apologizing for the inconvenience I'd caused them. We're here to fix things, Mom finally said. This situation has gone on long enough. What situation exactly? I asked. The identity theft? The professional sabotage? The decades of favoritism? Which aspect are you here to fix? Dad's face flushed. Don't be dramatic, Hazel. All families have their issues. But this silent treatment and legal nonsense has to stop. You're tearing the family apart over some sibling squabble. It's not a squabble when one person commits actual crimes against the other, Michael interjected quietly from beside me. What Allison did could have serious professional and legal consequences for Hazel. No one asked you, Allison snapped, speaking for the first time. This is between me and my sister. Michael is my partner, I corrected her. Anything that affects me affects him. And he stays for this conversation. A tense silence followed, the traditional family dynamics buckling under my refusal to follow the established script. Fine, Mom conceded. But we need to resolve this before it goes any further. What will it take for you to drop this vendetta and come back to the family? The framing of her question, positioning me as vengeful rather than protective of my own interests, crystallized everything I had learned in therapy. This isn't a negotiation, I said clearly. I'm not pursuing a vendetta. I'm establishing healthy boundaries after years of dysfunction. My conditions haven't changed. Acknowledgement of the patterns that have hurt me, family therapy to address the underlying issues, and genuine remorse, not just damage control. So you want us to admit we're terrible parents? Dad demanded. To grovel and beg forgiveness because we didn't treat you like the princess you think you are? No, I said, a sad smile touching my lips. I want you to see me, really see me, as a person with valid feelings and experiences, not just as an extension of yourselves or a support system for Allison. But I'm beginning to accept that might not be possible. Allison stepped forward, her carefully constructed composure cracking. You've always had everything so easy. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect fiancé. Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow? I just needed a chance. You've had countless chances, I replied, not unkindly. And stealing my identity wasn't your only option. I would have helped you legitimately if you'd asked. I always have. But you chose deception instead. Because you would have lorded it over me like you always do, she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. Allison, I began. But Mom cut me off. Don't upset your sister, she admonished automatically, the familiar pattern reasserting itself. You know how sensitive she is. And there it was, the dynamic laid bare in 5 words. Don't upset your sister. Not, don't commit identity theft. Not, don't sabotage your sister's career. But, don't upset the person who wronged you. A strange calm settled over me. I think you should leave now, I said quietly. I'm not dropping the legal protections I've put in place. I'm not pretending everything is fine when it isn't. And I'm not returning to a family system that requires me to be less so that Allison can feel more. If you do this, you're choosing to split this family, Dad warned, his tone carrying the weight of what he clearly viewed as the ultimate threat. No, I corrected him gently. I'm choosing to save myself. There's a difference. As they left, Allison's tears, Mom's wounded expressions, and Dad's stern disappointment no longer held the power over me they once had. I recognized them now as tools of manipulation rather than reflections of reality. After they'd gone, Michael wrapped his arms around me. You did great, he murmured against my hair. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But for the first time, it felt right. That evening, my inbox contained a surprise responses from family members I hadn't heard from initially. My cousin David wrote that my email had prompted him to reflect on similar patterns in his relationship with his brother. Aunt Sarah expressed remorse for believing the narratives about me without seeking my perspective. Even my grandmother, traditionally silent on family matters, sent a brief message: "Truth is harder than comfort, but lasts longer. Call me when you can." These connections, based on honesty rather than obligation, felt like the first green shoots after a long winter, tentative but full of potential. As Michael and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset over the Boston skyline, I realized that the day marked a turning point. I had faced my greatest fear, direct confrontation with my family, and emerged intact, even strengthened. "What are you thinking?" Michael asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "That sometimes walking away isn't an ending," I replied. "Sometimes it's the beginning of something better." The seaside glowed with warm light as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. White chairs lined the manicured lawn overlooking the Atlantic, a simple floral arch marking the spot where Michael and I would soon exchange vows. It was nothing like the elaborate wedding my mother had always envisioned for me, with hundreds of guests and all the traditional trappings. Instead, it was intimate, meaningful, and entirely ours. 6 months had passed since the confrontation in our apartment. 6 months of healing, growth, and rebuilding. As I stood at the window of the bridal suite, watching our 40 guests mingle on the lawn below, I felt a profound sense of peace. "You look beautiful," came a voice from the doorway. I turned to find Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, smiling tentatively. After my email to the extended family, she had been one of the first to reach out, apologizing for years of believing the family narrative about me without question. "Thank you for being here," I said, genuinely touched by her presence. "It means a lot." "I wouldn't have missed it," she replied, adjusting my simple veil. "I've missed too much already by not seeing what was happening." Our conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. The wedding planner peeked in. "Hazel? There's someone here asking to see you before the ceremony. He says he's your father." My heart stuttered. "My father is here?" Aunt Sarah squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to send him away?" I considered the question carefully. After months of therapy and reflection, I had accepted that my relationship with my parents might never heal. The wedding invitations had gone unanswered. But now, with my father apparently standing outside. "No," I decided. "I'll see him. Alone, please." When my father entered the room, I was struck by how much older he looked, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. He stood awkwardly by the door, his hands fidgeting with the brim of a dress hat I'd never seen before. "Hazel," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. You look like your grandmother on her wedding day." It wasn't what I'd expected him to say. "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "Why are you here, Dad?" He took a deep breath. "Your mother doesn't know I've come." "She wouldn't. She couldn't." "It's okay," I said softly. "Just tell me." "I've been seeing someone," he blurted, then immediately clarified. "A therapist, I mean. For a few months now. After what happened, I started having these dreams about my own father. Things I hadn't thought about in years." I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "He was hard on me. Nothing I did was ever good enough. Always comparing me to my cousin Richard, who became a doctor." He shook his head. "I swore I'd never be like that with my kids. But listening to you that day in your apartment, I realized I'd done the same thing, just differently. With Allison, I was always making excuses, never holding her accountable. With you, I was holding me to impossible standards. I finished for him." He nodded, looking down at his hat. "Dr. Morris, my therapist, says it's a common pattern. Children of critical parents either become critical themselves or swing to the opposite extreme. I did both, depending on which daughter I was dealing with." The clinical analysis felt surreal coming from my father, who had always dismissed therapy as paying strangers to listen to your problems. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," he continued, "or to intrude on your wedding. I wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand. And that I'm sorry. For all of it. The apology, simple but seemingly sincere, loosened something that had been tightly wounded within me for as long as I could remember. Not completely. Decades of hurt couldn't be undone with a single conversation, but enough to allow me to consider possibilities I'd previously dismissed. Thank you for coming to tell me that, I said. It means something. I should go, he said, turning toward the door. I don't want to upset your day. Dad, I called after him. There's an extra seat in the back row, if you'd like to stay for the ceremony. His eyes widened slightly. Are you sure? Just for the ceremony, I clarified. I'm not ready for more than that yet. But it's a start. As he left, Aunt Sarah returned with my bridesmaids, Lauren, my college roommate with whom I'd reconnected, and Melissa, Michael's sister who had become a dear friend. They helped with final adjustments to my dress, a simple ivory sheath that felt both elegant and authentically me. Was that your dad I saw heading to the ceremony? Lauren asked gently. Yes, I confirmed. He's making an effort. It's complicated. Family usually is, Melissa said with understanding. But you've got a new family starting today, too. The ceremony was everything I had hoped for, intimate, meaningful, and filled with genuine joy. Michael's eyes shone with tears as I walked down the aisle alone, a choice that symbolized my journey toward independence and self-worth. From the corner of my eye, I glimpsed my father in the last row, watching quietly, a witness rather than a participant. At the reception that followed, surrounded by people who truly supported us, Michael and I shared our first dance to a song about building new foundations. As we moved across the floor, I caught sight of my engagement ring, the emerald that had first caught the light in my parents' house over a year ago, now a symbol not just of our love, but of the difficult journey we'd navigated together. Happy? Michael murmured against my ear. Completely, I replied, and meant it. The morning after the wedding, as we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I received a text from an unexpected source, Allison. Saw Dad's photos from the ceremony, she wrote. You looked beautiful. I've started therapy too. Not ready to talk yet, but wanted you to know. I showed the message to Michael, uncertain how to feel about this tentative olive branch after everything that had happened. What do you think? I asked. I think healing happens at different paces for different people, he replied thoughtfully. And that you can acknowledge her effort without immediately dropping your boundaries. I considered his wisdom, then composed a brief response. Thank you for letting me know. I hope therapy helps you as much as it's helped me. Take the time you need. Over the months that followed, my relationship with my family evolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. My father continued therapy, occasionally sending me articles or books he found insightful, always careful not to push for more than I was ready to give. We eventually progressed to monthly coffee meetings, neutral territory, limited duration, focused on the present rather than rehashing the past. My mother remained more resistant to change, still firmly entrenched in the family dynamics she had helped create. But even she showed small signs of growth, sending a birthday card that acknowledged, for the first time, my promotion at work without immediately shifting focus to Allison's needs. Allison herself was the biggest surprise. After hitting what she called rock bottom when her engagement to Jake ended, apparently, he'd grown uncomfortable with her behavior patterns, she committed seriously to therapy. 6 months after the wedding, she sent me a letter, not an email, but an actual handwritten letter, acknowledging specific instances where she had hurt me and taking full responsibility without excuses. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she wrote, echoing our father's words from my wedding day. I'm just trying to be honest about what I did and why. The why doesn't excuse it, but understanding it helps me not repeat it. My professional life flourished as I poured energy previously consumed by family drama into creative projects at Meridian. I developed a financial literacy program for young adults that gained national attention, and was promoted to Director of Client Education, a role that combined my analytical skills with my growing passion for helping others build secure futures. Michael's career similarly thrived, his pediatric surgical practice expanding to include a clinic for underserved communities. Our home became a gathering place for friends, colleagues, and the chosen family we continued to build, people who valued authenticity over appearance, growth over stagnation. When the holidays approached, I received the expected invitation to my parents' annual Christmas celebration. In previous years, declining would have been unthinkable, accompanied by overwhelming guilt and inevitable fallout. This year, after careful consideration and discussion with Michael and Dr. Bennett, I sent a polite but firm response. Thank you for the invitation. Michael and I have made plans to volunteer at the Children's Hospital Christmas event, which has become meaningful to us. We wish you all a happy holiday season. No excuses, no elaborate justifications, just a clear choice to prioritize what mattered to us. The sky didn't fall. The earth didn't open up and swallow me for the transgression of putting my own plans first. Instead, I received a brief response from my father. We'll miss you, but the hospital event sounds wonderful. Perhaps we can get together in the new year. Progress, not perfection. As I stood in our kitchen on a snowy December evening, preparing hot chocolate for Michael after our hospital volunteer shift, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the shocking confrontation at Lou Maison, my sister screaming, "You ruined our lives," while my parents applauded, to the 99 calls that followed, to the painful but necessary separation, to the tentative rebuilding of relationships on healthier terms. The lessons had been hard-won but invaluable. True family isn't defined by blood, but by mutual respect, support, and genuine care. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means releasing yourself from the burden of anger. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for healthy relationships. Your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. And perhaps most importantly, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Michael entered the kitchen, snow still clinging to his dark hair, his smile warming me more than the hot chocolate ever could. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "Everything that's happened this year," I replied. "How different things are now." He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Regrets?" I considered the question seriously. "No," I answered truthfully. "Pain? Yes. Grief for what could have been? Absolutely. But not regret. Every step led me here, and here is exactly where I want to be." As the snow fell softly outside our window, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult journey that had brought me to this moment of peace. The road to healing wasn't linear, and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead. But I had found my voice, my boundaries, and my truth, gifts no one could take away again. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family obligation and personal well-being? What helped you find your path forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to hear more reflections on family dynamics, healing, and growth. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is quietly walk away from what hurts you. Thank you for being here, and may you find the strength to write your own story, whatever that may look like.